Hi, this is Jamey with Stonemeyer Games, and I'm here today to talk about my favorite game mechanism in Eldritch Horror. Eldritch Horror is a cooperative game that I played for the first time, I think last weekend, and it's a cooperative game set in the Cthulhu-style universe, where you are investigators trying to prevent the end of the world from happening. Basically, you're solving some little mysteries along the way, and then defeating a monster in the end. We didn't get that far. We lost the game. But there are a couple mechanisms that I really appreciate about Eldritch Horror, and so I wanted to talk about them. The first is that I mentioned that to win the game you have to defeat a monster or prevent the monster from showing up in the first place at all. And the really cool thing about this mechanism is that the game comes with a couple different monsters, and each monster actually has its own entire thematic deck of cards that pair up with that monster, which I always kind of appreciate that in games, when it's not just like a single card that says this is the monster and you use all the cards that you would from the other monsters, or that you have to go through all the other monster decks and pull out some and create a deck just for that monster at the beginning of the game. The game, and I might be incorrect about this, but I didn't set the game up, but I'm pretty sure the deck comes with 4 or 5 different decks of cards, one for each monster, which I thought was pretty cool. The second game mechanism, which is also tied to deck of cards, that I thought was really fascinating, were really the sheer number of decks of cards that you use during the game and how they're triggered based on different locations. So there might be a card that there might be a deck of cards that's associated with 3 different locations on the board, and really those locations have no connection. But the cool thing about these cards is when you draw the card, like when you go to one of the locations, at the end of each round, you usually have to draw a card for that location. But the game designer used a really clever, it's almost a graphic design thing, where on each of those cards, there are 3 paragraphs, one for each of the 3 locations. So say the stack of green cards corresponds with Egypt and Washington, D.C., and Kyoto, Japan. Those locations have nothing in common with each other, which is fine, because all the card is doing, when you draw one of those cards, there's a paragraph for Egypt, there's a paragraph for Washington, and there's a paragraph for Kyoto, and you just read the corresponding paragraph and act on it. And so the game is basically, it's able to pack in a lot of text, really, but into concise piles of cards that are separated. You don't have a big book that you have to go through. It could have been a book, but instead it's some cards. I just thought that was clever. The last thing is probably, I for some reason I haven't encountered this in too many games, but it's probably because I don't play too many Amerithrash style games. But the last thing is the game has a skill check mechanism that's very basic, but I really thought it was clever. In that on your investigators, you have, I think, 4 or 5 different stats. And obviously, like in any cooperative game, some characters are good at some things, others are not good. And those stats, they're numbers that are usually 1 to 3, and you can enhance them during the game. But they correspond with a bunch of skill checks that happen during the game where you're rolling dice. So a card might say, do a skill check for strength. I don't remember the actual term, but say it's strength. And your strength number is 2, which basically means that you just get to roll 2 dice, and if you're looking to achieve to pass the skill check, then you have to roll a 5 or a 6 on one of the dice. So basically, the basic idea is the more dice you roll, the better, and it's really easy to look at the dice and very quickly see if you passed or failed. You don't have to add up numbers or anything like that. And it all connects back to that number on your player sheet, because it's very easy to look at that number and see what you're good at and have a direct, almost tactile connection with what it means to be good at it. Because I see the number 2 and I know I get to roll 2 dice. 2 is better than 1. Which I know it's kind of obvious, but it's very gratifying to have that immediate connection, because especially during the game when you have the option of enhancing those numbers, whether it's permanently or if you have like a weapon that enhances one of those numbers or an artifact. Again, you have that immediate connection where you're seeing, okay, I only get to roll 1 die because I'm not good at influence. But if I get this card, then I'll increase it to 2 dice. 2 dice, that's twice as many dice. That's really good. And you can kind of almost, you have that tactile sensation of rolling 2 dice instead of 1. I'm struggling to actually explain this, but I think it's the connection, the simplicity of it, and the connection between that number and the number of dice that you roll. I just thought it was really nice. So those are the 3 mechanisms that I really appreciated in the game: the separate monster decks, the diversity of text and how that text was conveyed throughout the location cards in the game, and the simplicity and the tactile connection of the skill checks from that number to the dice that you roll. I think these are really cool. I'm sure in the comments you'll mention some other games that use these mechanisms in clever ways, and I kind of have them in the back of my head as things to maybe try in some of my games as well. Thanks for watching and listening, and have a good weekend.